All right, well, let's get started. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jody Hall, and I am one of the parent trainers here at Maine Parent Federation. We're really excited to bring to you today our newest workshop on healthy eating. And we prepared it as a guide for parents who have children with disabilities and special health care needs. And we're really intending for people to access this workshop as a resource. So our disclaimer is that we are trainers and we work for a nonprofit who is charged with the task of disseminating information and resources to families. And so we're not nutritionists or medical providers, but we have worked with some of them to create a workshop in which we can offer solutions and maybe help some parents think outside the box as we look at some of the eating challenges that might come as parents of kids who have special health care needs. I am a parent of a child who is 16 and a half, who has Down syndrome and some other diagnoses as well. And so the challenge of healthy eating is one that we definitely have struggled through in our family. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going today. And I'm joined by my colleague, Dylan Campbell. And Dylan, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Dylan Campbell and I'm a parent trainer like Jody is. I'm also a youth coordinator, so I do a lot of work with youth around self-advocacy and youth leadership. I am not a parent, but I have multiple siblings with disabilities and I've helped my family navigate the many systems of care here in Maine. So again, thank you for joining us today. Back to you, Jody.
Thanks. So we can go ahead to the first slide.
Not back to you, I guess. It's my slide. So this slide right here is just explaining that we are not a legal services agency and we cannot provide legal advice or legal representation. However, everything provided today is general information. You can think about it as a public service announcement. So healthy eating. Like Jody said, we're not nutritionists. We're generalists kind of on many of the topics. So first off, we're going to discuss the challenges to healthy eating habits, as well as how to respond if your child is challenged by meal times. Then we'll move on and talk about how to incorporate nutrition goals across all the plans. And then we'll learn about other resources here in Maine, such as the Let's Go 5210 program. So we know that nutritious food can help kids learn in the following ways: by providing long-lasting energy, by allowing the brain to function better, and by improving behavior. When we provide healthy choices for kids, we are helping them to develop healthy habits, which can lead to a positive lifelong impact. It's important as a parent to remember that you are a role model in your child's life. Your child will mimic your habits, your good habits and your bad habits. So making healthy food the default setting in your home can help promote healthy eating choices throughout life. So why are we talking about this? The unfortunate fact is that national rates of obesity have significantly increased in the past 20 years in kids 2 to 19 years old. Obesity is a very complex disease and it can look very different in every individual. But to put it short, obesity is excess body fat. It's important to remember that everybody is different and your doctor can help you determine if your body weight is healthy for you. There are many contributing factors to the rise in obesity. We don't want to place any individual blame on parents or families because the fact is it's societal changes. This includes our increased consumption of processed foods and foods high in sugar. There's nothing wrong with the occasional slice of pizza. It's all about moderation, as well as increased use of electronics such as TV, iPads, video games. Living in our day and age, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, it is hard not to use electronics. We're living, working, and educating ourselves through our iPads and laptops, such as being more sedentary, We're not driving, we're sitting more in front of computers. All these factors lead to the rise in obesity.
We also know that individuals with higher rates of obesity can experience increased health problems. And so that's another reason why we want to address this today. We hear from a lot of parents that, they have challenges in terms of helping their kids maintain healthy weight and combat this obesity epidemic. So the statistics show that 20% of youth with special health care needs, age 10 to 17, actually are diagnosed as being obese. And this is higher than the rates of their peers, their typically developing peers. For that category, we're talking only about 15% of youth. We do also know that kids with special health care needs often begin developing the excess weight at an earlier age compared to their typically developing peers. Youth who do have special health care needs may face additional challenges, and we've listed out a few of the examples that we're talking about. So that may include disability-specific circumstances. Genetics can play a role in one's body weight. The lack of access to preventative health may be a factor, or more challenging environments and challenges with mobility. Medications, this can be a big one, whether it suppress appetite or increase. Pain as well, which can reduce mobility or have a negative effect on appetite, and lack of resources. Here's an example that this is actually something that we have taken from a nutritionist who we consulted in making this presentation. And so in her words, an example of a disability-specific challenge is, in many children with autism, the gut microbiome craves carbs. Carbs produce propionic acid, which may worsen the symptoms of autism. And some children with autism also have seizure disorders. These children are frequently placed on ketogenic or low-carb diets, and this helps to reduce the frequency and severity of seizures and autism. Many parents are unaware. So again, we are not the nutrition experts here, and so we are not advocating for any particular dietary changes or plans, but this was an example from a nutritionist of how a disability can truly impact the chemistry and the physical makeup of a child that can lead to specific challenge in terms of healthy eating. So we encourage you to talk with your child's medical providers before making any major changes to your child's diet. Let's look at some of the challenges your child may experience. Selective eating is very common for kids, whether that be preference of color or smell. Texture is a huge one. Temperature, or even brands. Texture is one in our house we continue to struggle with this day. And it's something that we've worked for years and years to try to help my son tolerate a greater variety of textures. But this did not come naturally for him. This has taken a lot of years of therapies and implementing plans at home. And even still, there are certain textures that he probably will never quite get past. Another challenge may be disruptive meal times. Scheduling meals, that can be challenging with multiple family members, or a refusal to engage in meal times. Distractions or lack of interest. When my son was little, he had zero interest in food. He was not motivated by food. He was not interested in trying a variety of food. And so meal times were just not something that he was interested in. Additionally, your kiddo may have unique eating patterns. They may engage in rituals or have a preferred order in which they would like to eat their foods, and it may be challenging. Food focused. So I mentioned that my son previously had no interest in food. Now that he's 16 and a half, we are at the other end, and he is now very food focused, so fixated on food. When he wakes up every day, he says, "What's for dinner today?" And then he says, "And now what's for dinner tomorrow?" So being impatient for the next meal. Food or drink preferences can be another challenge. The kids may be more drawn to processed foods and foods high on sugar and salt. And then a lack of self-regulation. Perhaps the child eats too fast or has a low sense of fullness and an inability to moderate. And this is something that, again, my son struggles with. And he doesn't have that kind of full sense. And so if left to his own devices, he will overeat until the point where he actually may vomit. So, that's a real thing that we have to support him through. More challenges. So human behavior around food, whether that's food rewards or food restrictions, pressure or anxiety. I know that this can be a really challenging topic for families. And so sometimes when meal times are stressful and parents feel the pressure to get it right and make sure that their kids are eating, the right combinations of foods and fruits and veggies, that pressure can kind of come out and it can transfer onto the kids. And so it can be a hard thing to move past. Medical problems, chewing and swallowing, muscle tone, gastrointestinal, dental pain. Definitely, this was a part of my son's history as well. He had his first swallowing test, his swallow study, when he was just 3 months old. And we started working with specialists from then on. Additionally, negative side effects of various medications. I touched on that a little bit ago as well. There can be a loss of appetite or the desire to binge eat. And then there can also be metabolic changes within the kiddo.
Additionally to some of the more specific challenges that Jody had just mentioned, there are also many systemic challenges. And this is really the lack of coordination among healthcare providers and the lack of awareness and understanding of the challenges, as well as inconsistent practices and messaging and inadequate support from professionals in different settings. Children with special healthcare needs often work with many providers who support various areas of development. It's important to emphasize need for consistent messaging among these providers in order to have the best outcomes for children. So as a parent of a child with a disability or special healthcare need, you were working with many different professionals across many different systems of care. Oftentimes, the messaging in between each can be inconsistent. So it's important to try to build consistency between each of the providers, as they often work in a silo. Oh, wrong way. So what about the choosy eaters? Becoming a choosy eater may be a sign that your child is exhibiting greater independence, and your reactions and attitudes may help them through this phase. It's important to stay positive and avoid labeling the child. Try to keep the words positive and don't criticize them or call them picky. Picky has a negative connotation to it. As well as maybe provide a few choices and let your child decide. And keep in mind that they may choose nothing at all. Perhaps you could provide choices for snack time. Perhaps maybe a cookie, an apple, or a carrot, and let your child decide. And it helps build decision-making skills. And then focus on the positive eating behavior rather than the food, and give encouragement and positive feedback when they are making choices. So maybe you are giving them the choices for a snack. Encourage them, praise them, and give positive feedback when they choose one of the more desirable options. As well as trust your child's appetite. If they express that they are full, do not force them to eat more. Sometimes maybe a clean plate rule in your house maybe not be the right fit. As well as throughout all of this, be patient and continue to expose your child to a variety of foods, even if they are not the preferred ones. So when does choosy eating become a problem? Well, it becomes a problem when the number of food or the type of food decreases. When your child isn't able to get the variety and the nutrition value that they need throughout the day, that may become an issue. When food choices are unhealthy, maybe your child has a specificity for unhealthy foods and they don't want to eat their broccoli. That could also be an issue, as well as other extreme mealtime challenges. This could include maybe skipping meals or waking up in the middle of the night for food because they refuse to eat their meal earlier. Significant weight gain or weight loss. This goes in both ways. It's an issue when your child gains significant weight, but it's also an issue when your child loses a significant amount of weight. It also impacts the child's mental and physical health. As we mentioned in the beginning slide, when we provide our children with healthy food choices, it allows them to learn, it allows them to grow, it allows them to function better.
How to respond if your child is challenged by meal times. The first priority should always be to rule out any medical problems, such as dental pain, oral motor problems, or gastrointestinal issues. And you really should schedule a checkup with your child's medical providers. It never failed when my son was little, before he really had many language skills. He would have a tough day behaviorally, and just a lot of kind of outbursts and challenges that weren't typical for him. And wouldn't you know, by the evening, he would always end up spiking a fever, and we'd say, okay, this was how he was expressing that something was wrong. It wasn't a true behavioral issue, in that it was really more of a symptom of pain that he felt. So this would be true in meal times as well. If your child is suddenly experiencing challenges that is not typical of them during meal times, definitely consult the medical providers and rule out any kind of medical problems first. And then you can move on to address behavior once the medical has been ruled out or treated. Addressing disruptive behaviors by consulting a behavioral specialist, such as a board-certified behavioral analyst, is a great idea, and they can help you to create a behavior plan around meal times. You could also consult a nutritionist. There are a lot of great pediatric nutritionists these days and registered dietitians who concentrate on helping families who have children with special healthcare needs to be able to create a plan in which the child can get the best nutrition possible. Introduce foods. Making sure to introduce new flavors and textures slowly, and making sure that you're doing just one food item at a time. It's setting the kiddo up for failure if they sit down to a meal and their entire plate is covered with new foods. It's too big of an ask for them. So making sure that you're intentional and just changing one thing at a time. And then increasing incrementally the consumption of healthy foods. Again, they wouldn't sit down to a whole plate of all new and all healthy foods. And so, like Dylan's example earlier, when providing snack choices, I think he used an apple, carrots, and a cookie, right? And so maybe keeping some of the sweet in there and offering some of the healthy. And then eventually, instead of one sweet and two healthy, maybe it's finally three healthy, and then the sweet comes later in the day. But really making sure that you're taking kind of baby steps with it, not too much, not too quickly. Healthy foods by texture. This, as I mentioned before, can be a big challenge for a lot of kids, and for that matter, adults as well. There are still certain textures that I really don't care for, and I'm a good eater. So figure out what texture your child's favorite food is. Is it creamy, crispy, frozen, crunchy, lumpy, squishy? But hone in on what that favorite texture is, and then try to introduce new foods with similar textures first as a building block, as a basis. So this handout on the right-hand side of the screen actually comes from the Let's Go 5210 program. And it's a really creative handout. So it says many children with intellectual and developmental disabilities are extra sensitive to the textures of certain foods. This can make it hard for families and caregivers to get them to try new fruits, vegetables, and other healthy foods. Children may be more willing to try new foods if they like how the food feels. Try introducing children to new foods based on the textures they prefer. And then it really lists out all of the different types of related foods under each of those texture categories: the creamy, the frozen, the crispy, and the crunchy. And it also provides tips at the end of each section. This is included, by the way, in our slides, because I know that this is a lot of information for you to just be seeing online. But Dylan included in the chat box a link to the slides in which you can grab them right from the Google Drive. But one of the tips that it says is you can freeze just about anything. So if your child strongly prefers frozen foods, try freezing other foods like cheese sticks and breads. So it may provide you with some tips that you haven't otherwise thought about. How to respond if your child is challenged at meal times. Be a role model and use language that helps, not hinders. For example, if your child tries something new, acknowledge that and say thank you for trying new things. Even if they've decided they didn't like it, they were willing to try it. Increase structure, such as the use of timers or visual aids. This is a big one. We still use this in my house. And typically in the morning when my son is tired and he's getting ready for school and he does not feel like eating, but he needs to start his day off with some food, we actually use a timer so that he can move a little bit quicker, because otherwise, if left to his own devices, he might just sit there for the entire hour that he's supposed to be getting ready for school. So a timer's a good idea, or a visual aid that breaks down the steps of mealtime and keeps the kiddo on track. Possibly remove food from brand boxes or containers if this is one of the challenges that your child has. Just putting it into a plastic, Tupperware or plastic container is a great tip. We do that with a lot of our foods, and we just keep it in the pantry that way. And this is another great resource. This is from choosemyplate.gov. And again, you can find this in the slides on our Google Drive. But this is phrases that help and phrases that hinder. So I'll just read a couple to give you an example. But instead of saying, eat that for me, try saying, this is kiwi fruit and it's sweet like a strawberry. Instead of saying, if you do not eat one more bite, I will be mad, try saying, these radishes are very crunchy. So the phrases that hinder, phrases like those teach your child to eat for your approval and love, and this can lead to a child having unhealthy behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs about food and about themselves. And then the phrases that help point to the sensory qualities of food, and they encourage your child to try new foods. So this is a great handout. As I mentioned, I would just encourage you to check that out more fully. I won't sit here and read through all of it, but some nice creative one-liners and ways of framing your language to help your child with their eating challenges.
Here are a few more tools to help address eating challenges. The first tip is daily schedules. These can help your child get into a routine and know what to expect. I think these are very handy. A lot of children may need that structure in their daytime, especially in their meal times. So maybe a daily schedule could fit for your family, where you break down the activity into much smaller steps. This one on the left hand is sit at the table, eat, sit until done, clean up the table, and then go play. It can help give a child a visual representation of what to expect.
Yeah, and if I could just interrupt for 1 second, that part is so great, but I want to point out too, depending on the stage where the kiddo is at, it may even need to be broken down more fully. And what I mean is, when my son was really little, he didn't even remember to chew his food before swallowing. So we literally would break it down into chew, 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 swallow as well. So like, this is an awesome example, but don't feel like it's beyond where your child might be. You can use these tools and adapt them to best support your kiddo.
Yeah, exactly. Nicely said, Jody. You can scale in or out to meet your needs. Another tool is a food journal, and these can help track eating habits to gain better insight into patterns and challenges. There are many free online templates online. The one we have provided here is from the American Academy of Family Physicians, and it is essentially set up into a time column, a food and drink column, a symptoms, thoughts, feelings column, and then an am I hungry column. And throughout the day, you just label and you put down what you ate, and then afterwards, how do you feel? For example, at 7:30, I had 2 pieces of toast with a spread of butter, 2 cups of coffee. Your child probably isn't having that for breakfast. But their thoughts and feelings were, I was running late, so I grabbed something quick. Am I hungry? Yes. It helps you gain insight throughout the day of what made me feel like what, and was I hungry afterwards? It's just a nice visual representation. Another great visual aid is a hunger scale. These can help assess hungry feelings and eliminate mindless eating. So sometimes the feeling of hunger for kiddos and adults, it can be hard to differentiate whether you're bored or whether you're hungry. So a hunger scale can be a nice visual representation to put onto a scale of where I'm hungry. On the left-hand side, 1 would be I am starving and feeling weak and dizzy. And then the other hand would be 10. I'm so full you feel sick. And then your child would pick the number where they feel in between. Meal pacing. As Jody had mentioned before, a timer is very useful in her household. So timers and visual aids can help improve a child's pace of eating. Another visual aid is a social story, and these help to pre-teach a child about healthy eating. The one we have over here on the left is I can eat healthy each and every day. I always remember to make good choices about the food that I eat every day. I eat lots of vegetables and fruits. If I remember to eat my vegetables and fruits every day, then I will become very smart, very healthy, and very strong. So the social story is a great way to introduce these topics to your child. Excuse me. And token systems are another way. And token systems encourage desirable behaviors by earning small tokens such as stickers, marbles, or cards. There are many different ways that you can have a token system set up for you. Generally, you have a goal or an I am working for box, and then you have multiple tokens, stars throughout each step of the way to get to the goal. Similar to what Jody had mentioned before on the schedule of how you can modify it to your needs, first, then statements. You can also modify them. So visual aids help a child when having difficulty understanding language or following directions. Use first, then statements, such as this one is first we'll eat, and then we're going to play outside. Like Jody had mentioned before, much in the same way a schedule can be modified, these first then statements can be modified to meet each step. And then step-by-step guides to help break down each activity into smaller steps. So maybe your child is learning how to make a PB&J. You wouldn't just have a make a PB&J list. You would have a step-by-step breakdown of how to go about it. I think this is a great visual aid here on the left. Yeah, so sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. I said recently that's exactly what my son is working on right now, and that's totally appropriate for him, just in the level of detail that is required. How to work with healthcare providers to overcome challenging eating. As Dylan said at the beginning of the workshop, it's really about making changes across the system to best support the child, as opposed to just expecting that the parent is solely responsible for the nutritional needs of the kiddo. So we're going to look a little bit about how to do that and work together as a team. So again, the first thing we always suggest would be to diagnose the underlying cause of an eating problem and determine an appropriate treatment plan. And again, like ruling out the physical problems and separating out physical problems from behavioral issues is really key in this. If there's a physical issue with a child swallowing, you're going to treat that very differently than if the child is just having a behavioral issue about a preference, right? And so it's really important that we get a clear feel for what is actually driving the challenges in eating. Working with providers, make sure you're discussing the impact of medications on appetite and metabolism. Sometimes there are drug interactions that we're not aware of, and just making sure that the providers are fully up to speed on diet and medications. And then coordinating with other healthcare providers as well. So that might include psychiatry, endocrinology, gastrointestinal specialists, but these are all providers who can help to work through challenging eating scenarios. And then receiving referrals to nutritionists, an occupational therapist, and a speech language pathologist. I know personally we've worked with both OT and SLPs to help with feeding issues in our house. And without their support, we definitely would not be as far along in the progress that my son has made, because we just don't know the things that they are experts about. And we didn't have the correct knowledge and background to create plans that were appropriate for him. So I really credit a lot of his increased eating and ability to accept new foods to the work that he did for years with both his occupational therapist and his speech language pathologist.
I don't know why it's not going, but.
Oh, it's not, okay. Supporting nutritional eating at school. Families should work with their individualized education program and individualized family service plan, depending on the age of the kiddo, teams to update plans which reinforce your child's nutritional plan at school. This is a really big category that I think sometimes parents forget about. Special education teachers are a great resource and can be a great collaborator in this, in supporting healthy nutrition eating and nutritional goals within the school day. Those teachers can conduct preference assessments to identify non-food rewards, which is a big one. They can create and update behavior intervention plans to include non-food rewards and reduce any food rewards, and also share new reinforcement strategies with other members of the team. It's really important for parents to have this conversation with the teachers and even with the whole IEP team, so that the team is aware of what your goals are and they can work together to help support the healthy eating and create a customized plan for the kiddo within the school day. Additional provider support can come from occupational therapists, speech therapists, and primary care physician. And those providers can help to diagnose and treat sensitivities that impact eating. I mentioned earlier too, a board certified behavioral analyst. They can help to develop a plan and a timeline for reducing the use of food rewards. That can be a big one. A lot of times we kind of fall into what works to get our kids motivated to engage in a task. And for a lot of kids, that's food. And it can be hard to reduce some of those. So I'm not saying that they should never be used, but if that's the primary way to motivate a kid to engage in anything, then we probably need to work with a behavior specialist to look at how we can reduce that. In-home support workers can help to promote healthy habits and provide support implementing healthy eating plan. This is a great one. They can help to work on cooking skills at home and helping to understand the healthy foods and support the kiddos in that way outside of school. Then a nutritionist can assist in making lifestyle changes rather than just creating a diet. And teachers can teach the difference between healthy and unhealthy foods and celebrate with healthy foods or activities. And I think that's a big one too, is making sure that kids who do have special healthcare needs and disabilities are receiving curriculum from the school, which does teach about nutrition and healthy eating. I've said before that my daughter, who is typically developing and in middle school, did an entire unit in her health class about how to read and assess a nutrition label, how to plan out what would be a healthy food plan for a day. And she really received a lot of guidance and instruction about this. But I realized my son, who's quite a bit older, had never had any teaching about that. And so we had a conversation with the school and realized, oh, that was a missing component, you know, and this was something that the school definitely got on board with. And so it's consistent messaging, much like Dylan talked about in the beginning as well. Consistent messaging at home, at school, amongst providers really does help to create the best plan for success and reinforce what it is those kids need to learn.
So let's talk a bit more about food rewards. So according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, food should not be used food should be used as a nourishment, not as reward or punishment. In the long run, food rewards or bribes usually create more problems than they solve. So a food reward is food used to reward desirable behavior. An edible reinforcer, which you may hear sometimes, is sometimes used in behavior plans or IEPs to encourage particular outcomes. Other new non-food reinforcers should be identified and used instead. Just gonna move the Zoom box real quick. Oh. Rewarding kids with food, whether healthy or unhealthy, encourages eating outside of meal times. Rather than emphasizing intentional eating, this promotes mindless eating and can lead to poor eating habits. Mindless eating is when you're eating when not hungry, such as a bag of chips on the couch, and then you realize the entire bag's gone. There are many practical ways to offer healthy options, though. Maybe you can celebrate with healthy foods if you do celebrate with foods. That could be yogurt parfaits, fruit and cheese kebabs, whole wheat English muffin pizza, baked sweet potato fries. Or maybe you celebrate with non-food options, such as a point reward system. A few slides ago, I had mentioned the token system. Maybe you could implement that into your routine and to take the emphasis off of food.
Yeah, that's something we actually worked on in our house too. We realized that my son was very motivated by food and we started using that too much as a reward. And so we kind of, you know, just informally did our own preference assessment as he was getting older and interested in more things. We found Xbox was a huge motivator. And so now we've replaced most food with, you know, earning Xbox time. And that's been a really good switch for him. It's still not the most active, but it has been a switch from food.
Baby steps, Jody.
Yes, right. Incrementally increase. Let's look at how to incorporate nutrition goals across plans. We've talked about this several times now throughout the workshop because we think it's really important. Oh, Dylan, it went all the way. I don't know where it went. It's not where I am though. That's okay. So this graphic is great, keeping the student in the center of it all and looking at the different areas that are part of the student's life or the kiddo's life. So there's the home life, which is the family. There's the school day, which really makes up a lot of the kid's life. And then there's community professionals, which might be in-home support or any extracurricular activities, people that work with kids there. So keeping the student in the center there and then looking at the overlap between those areas and making sure that we're looking at again, that word consistent, but really providing consistent instruction, looking at making sure that everybody has the same priorities and messages. So each team member can play a role in developing non-food rewards and using them to support healthy habits. And again, we really don't want this just to be a responsibility of a family, but we believe it's all of those people that are part of the equation who can support the kiddo in a healthy lifestyle. So the Maine Health Let's Go 5210 program, we mentioned it a little bit ago because they had one of the slides up on the screen. It was the foods by texture handout that I liked so much. Most parents are probably somewhat familiar with this. When you go to your annual pediatric checkup with your kiddo. You fill out a form and it talks about, how many fruits and vegetables they eat during the day, how much physical activity, and that all comes from the 5210 program. And it's really an evidence-based program that was designed to help to promote healthy behaviors and not so much about weight, but it was born out of the need, actually in Maine. It's now a national program, but it originated right here. Was born out of the need when local providers started seeing increased rates of obesity amongst children here. And so the group of doctors got together and they wrote this curriculum, and they started this initiative to help partner with healthcare practices, early care and education centers, schools and school nutrition programs, and even out of school or after school programs. So there is a Let's Go 5210 partner in every community in the state, I believe. And we've included contact information there for one of the coordinators, that if anybody would like more information or would like to follow up with their local representative of 5210, that you can actually contact Diane Boaz, right, at that email address there. So the Let's Go program also designed a toolkit specifically for children who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And this is instructional about getting started with healthy eating, moving away from non-food reward, or using non-food rewards and moving away from food rewards, increasing physical activity, and health care. And there's a link right there for the toolkit as well, which is free to download. So this is all of our contact information. We have a fancy new logo there, which I really love now. Some of you who are longtime viewers might recognize that. I really appreciate you guys spending time with us. We would love to take any questions in the chat box if you have any. And we are actually going to launch a quick 8-question poll, which, if you wouldn't mind just filling out real quick. It's just so that we can collect data for our grant funders and continue to do the work that we do based on your feedback. So I don't think I'm able to do that. Dylan, are you able to launch that poll?
I am, actually.
Oh, perfect.
Just launched.